Hi, and welcome to the Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building podcast presented by Wolf Precision Incorporated, where we learn about and share long range shooting and custom rifle building. I am your host, Jamie Dotson, and welcome to the show. All right, and welcome to episode 74 of Wolf Precision's Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Dotson, and welcome to the show. All right, in this episode, we are going to be talking about the glass. That's right, we're going to be spending some time talking about some binoculars, optics, and some things to think about when you're choosing it, whether you're into the hunting aspects of it, varmint hunting, big game, or if you're into competition shooting. So really excited for this episode. Thank you so much for joining us, but without further ado, here we go. All right, before we get started too much into this episode, I do want to say a quick thank you to Krieger Barrels. Krieger is the maker of fine cut rifled barrels. They have multiple ways that you can purchase, including Krieger Direct, where you can go and find barrels in inventory ready to purchase. That way you can have them within a couple business days. Also, you can go on and find they have a sales item page where you can go in and find different barrels of different contours and twist rates and just some really unique things that you could pick through and maybe find something that will work for your project. So anyway, great barrels. We use them here. Great sponsors of the podcast. We really appreciate their help with the show. Stop over to Krieger Direct or Krieger.com today and pick out your barrel. Also, we'd like to say a quick thank you to TriggerTech. Now, TriggerTech has really stepped up to the plate. They have sent us some really great demos for the new showroom that we're putting together for customers to come in and basically their fake actions. They can work the triggers and try all the different makes and models. So thank you, TriggerTech, for sending that out. And also thank you for taking the time to sponsor the show. We think that if you're going to take the time to put a trigger in your rifle or a replacement trigger, why not put the best in there? And we truly do believe that is TriggerTech. From the primary trigger, which we think is a fantastic hunting trigger, the whole way up to the world-class diamond. So stop over to triggertech.com today. That is triggertech.com. All right, I thought this would be a really cool episode to talk about glass and optics, and more importantly, binoculars, and some of the pros and cons that, aren't often really talked about or thought about much. We go through and we pick up a couple pair and we pick one out that we think looks nice and off to the races that we go. But there are some really cool things coming out that we're excited about. And there's also a lot of food for thought for this. I have spent a lot of time carrying binoculars around my neck. You don't think about it much, but they are in the worst place for a shooter or for a hunter because they're usually strapped around your neck, whether it's a harness that goes around your shoulders or it's just a regular strap that hangs around your neck. They're big, they're heavy, and after 1 or 2 days of hunting, they are really annoying sometimes. If you're stalking, they catch and drag on everything. They make a lot of noise. If they're big and bulky, they get in the way of shooting prone. And even sometimes the straps and everything else that you're using to carry these big binoculars get in the way of shouldering the rifle or cause some other issues there, so that you've got this big thing sticking out on your chest. What I have really wanted to talk about with this podcast is some food for thought. So I'm getting ready to replace 1 or 2 pair of my binoculars, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about what I want to do and the mistakes that I've made in the past. And so I want to share with you some food for thought, what we ended up purchasing as far as what I'll be hunting with for the next couple of years, and just some replacements. And one in particular that I'm really excited about that I think is going to be, as a shooter or someone who knows how to run a rifle and how to spot and how to call corrections in mills, some really cool stuff coming out that I think is a big benefit. It's sort of going to be like one of those underlying, unsung, missed opportunities for people that actually know how to read a reticle. So when I'm getting ready to purchase a new product, I am like everybody else. I suffer from gear acquisition syndrome. And, I love research. I like to read all the details. I like to get the product. I like to look at it, really put it through its paces. And I'm the guy that's diving into some of the specs as far as the coatings or the weight is a big one. The cups and the cup design. It's a piece that it's equipment, but it's these little things start to make a difference. And let me point out why. You can get binoculars now that have a 10 or 12 by 50. So a really big pair of binoculars. You can now get binoculars with built-in range finders and angle corrections and computer systems built into them. I think you're going to see a lot more of that coming. But right now, you've got to think about, the weight and the size. So when you're picking all this stuff out, you really do have a lot of options. And they can range from a really nice pair of binoculars that are $200, $300, $400 to a Swarovski EL range that can cost upwards of $3,900. And so you've got a big gap in between and some other things that are, I think, just as more important other than the options that they offer. So it's not always about the price. And I want to go through like some things to think about depending on the type of hunting that you're doing, and really food for thought for making a really good selection for your use. So let's dive into the ranging binoculars, like something like the Swarovski. Now, I'm a huge fan of Swarovski. They are fantastic products. I also love Collis, who is owned by Swarovski. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. They make world-class stuff. But that said, when you get into like the EL range-finding binocular, or in that area, they're not only just really expensive, but they're big and heavy. And man, I have learned lessons about having something that weighs a couple pounds around your neck while you're hunting, or strapped to your chest, just pulling and catching on things. The other thing that I've learned while I was hunting and making selections with equipment, especially something like the binocular, you almost have to look at it that it could be a throwaway item. In other words, you toss it off to the side to get it off your chest to make a shot in a hurry, and it bounces right off a rock, off a lens. Your buddy steps on it because he's running around trying to get in position to spot for you. The horse steps on it. You lose it. You set it down at lunch and you walk away and you come back and it's green and you can't find it. So when it comes to a piece of equipment like this, I look at it in two ways. I look at it both in its use and utilitarian capabilities, like what can we use it for, how good is it going to be, and then also the tear factor. Am I going to cry like crazy if that thing gets lost or broken or smashed? So, for example, we had a laser rangefinder like 20 years ago that would range out to 3 to 5 kilometers, and back then that was really unheard of. And it was on loan to us, and it was just cost was like $12,000 to $15,000. And we were out shooting woodchucks, and there was a group, and the case got put back away, but the binoculars and the rangefinder wasn't in it. So I went a whole week and went down to the shop and started pulling stuff out to go hunting, and opened the case up for the laser, and it wasn't in there. Then it flashed into my head that, it's at the last place we hunted at a week ago, laying on the ground. So while everybody was gathering up all the equipment, somebody forgot to put it back in. My responsibility for sure. I should have checked, but when everybody gathered up everything, said we had it, I did a visual check of the cases. We were good. We left. So anyway, I went back to that farm. Sure enough, it was laying right on the ground where we left it. But that taught me a really good lesson about expensive gear. You almost have to be willing to accept the fact that it's going to get damaged, broken, or potentially lost, or even stolen at that matter. So when it comes to like binoculars and stuff like this, I sort of weigh that in. I know it sort of sounds strange, but I put that into that factors. If I break it or my buddy steps on it walking around me trying to get a good spot for me and does some serious damage to it, because we have done this, am I going to be in like absolute panic mode that I just flushed $3,000 down the toilet? So the Swarovski, I think it's great, and then for some guys it might be the best choice. The glass is superb, the rangefinder's excellent. I mean, it really is just an incredible piece of equipment. But for me, it's too big, and it's also too expensive to lose or damage or be exposed to that kind of a loss just because of how we use our equipment. Now, when it comes to the magnification of binoculars and the size, here's one I thought was good, and this is why I pulled it into this podcast here. My personal next set of binoculars is going to be an 8x32. So Leopold come out with their new BX4s, and they have a Pro Guide series that's HD 8x32. And that is my main pair of binoculars. The reason I went that route is because it's weight and it's utilitarian. So when you get into magnification of the actual binoculars themselves, a lot of guys always go with more is better. So if they have the option of going to 8 to 10 power, they'll go with 10 power. And in binoculars, it's a double-edged sword on this one. So I talked to Blandford Bolt, is our representative from Collis, and we were talking a little bit about magnification on just binoculars themselves and some of the different binoculars and statistically what sells the most at what magnification range. And he says that typically the 10 by 42s or in that area sell more than the 8 magnification in the same class of binoculars by a big gap. But he thinks in his mind that that's a mistake, that you lose so much of what a binocular really is what it's made to do for. Now, it's not a spotting scope. So he was saying that on some of their binoculars now they have a head brace that you can brace the binoculars against your head so it doesn't move as much. Is that really what binoculars were made for, or is that spotting scope territory? So, yeah, that can be a small issue, and it's just more gear to carry or something else to break, or when you step on it, that piece is attached to the binocular, now you've done some serious damage. But going back to the 8 and 10 magnification and 12 magnification, going from an 8 magnification to 10 magnification, you do get a little bit more, maybe at long range. So like, for example, open range territory in Idaho or Montana, where you can see literally for 1,000 yards, 2,000 yards. I can see where that could play, just for a quick glance of everything, but there's not that much of a difference between 8 and 10 power. And in those scenarios, aren't you going to have a spotting scope for that type of work? You know, if you see something in an area that's in your binoculars, can't you just break out your spotting scope and sort of verify what you're looking at? But here's the trade-off, is you've got a loss of clarity and you've got a loss of field of view. You know, binoculars are meant to scan from up close to far away, but, you know, you have to look at it from a percentage point. Most of your shots, especially in hunting, are probably going to be within 200 yards. And so as we go from 200 yards to 300 yards, to 300 yards to 400 yards, from 400 yards to 500 yards, statistically speaking, the percentages go down dramatically. And so would an 8-power magnification cover 80% of your hunting life as far as your average shot? And wouldn't it be nicer at the closer stuff to have a much bigger field of view and more light transmission? So the 8 magnification is going to give you a much bigger field of view. So for the up-close stuff, you don't have a tunnel vision. You're not searching around. You've got a really nice big field of view still, and it's brighter. So a 10 by 42 compared to an 8 by 42, the 8 by 42 is going to allow a lot more light. It's going to be brighter. Then you've got your eye relief. The more you add magnification, the more you start to make eye relief very critical. So that distance between the lens and your eye, all of a sudden it starts to get smaller and smaller. That's just how they work. And so you've got that aspect of it. And then here's the one for me, is the weight difference. So if you look at the Leopold line, like the BX4 line, they make an 8 by 42 and they make an 8 by 32. I chose the 32 for my general hunting. And the reason being is the 8 by 32 weighs 17 ounces. The 8 by 42 is over 23 and a half ounces. Now, that might not sound like a lot. That's almost a half a pound. But remember, in hunting, ounces equal pounds, pounds equal pain, and an extra half a pound hanging around your neck for 8 hours will start to wear on you. The size of the binoculars themselves are getting in the way more as you're moving. They're wider, they're longer, they're heavier, so they're stretching down farther. They have that like spring factor when you have that little harness that you put your binoculars on that go around your shoulders. And so the heavier the binoculars are, the more that they stretch and move and bounce and slide around. The smaller ones are more secure. They're lighter, strapped in on your chest. They're not in the way for like an offhand quick shot. You don't have that binocular in the way as easy. And then also, they're light. They're easy to use. And for me, in doing a lot of varmint hunting in the summertime, I mean tons of varmint hunting in the summertime, and my typical binoculars were 42, and 10 by 42 was the average. And I'm going to go down to the 8s, and I'm going to go to 32 for my general hunting binoculars. And it's for these reasons. Number one, I really do want a nice field of view, so I can go with a lighter set of binoculars and still get a decent field of view. They do make a 10 by 32, by the way. So if you wanted the more magnification in that route, you could get it. But I want the 8 power. 8x32, light, easy. It's going to be perfect for the most of the glassing that it's going to be used for, which is under 1,000 yards. And even beyond that, let's face it, if you've got 8 magnification at 1,500 yards on a far hillside, it's way better than using your eyes. And you've got the clarity of the 8 rather than the 10. You've got the light transmission of the 8 rather than the 10. You've got the weight reduction of the 8 rather than the 10. I just like it. I think like Blandford had said that he really thinks a lot of people make the mistake when they're given the option of going with the 10 over the 8. Most will choose the 10 thinking more is better. But it does come with those prices. And he says a lot that the light transmission is a huge, that you actually can see so much better at those magical, that first half hour of daylight or that last half hour. Your clarity just goes through the roof. That's where they shine. And that's where this really plays an important role. So consider weight when you're going that route, and also consider magnification. I think those are 2 key important things to think about with binoculars, besides, the price and the options that you're looking for. Now, everybody knows I'm a huge fan of Leupold. I'm a huge fan of Collis. I'm a huge fan of Swarovski. No arguments there whatsoever. They make great product. And, I said binoculars can be a really big throwaway item. If somebody smashes it, it gets stepped on by a horse. I've seen packs get thrown around and get bounced off of rocks. I mean, this stuff happens. Lost, stolen, you name it. They also make a BX2 line, which if you do any reviews on the Leupold binoculars, they actually get a great review. They're a really great piece of glass. And so they actually make a BX2 line. They call it the Alpine HD series, that you can get an 8x42 or 10x42 that's right around $200, which I think is just, for what we used to pay for binoculars 10, 15 years ago, $200 still didn't get you much. The glass quality wasn't quite as good back then. I mean, I can take my $400 or $500 pair of binoculars that I purchased back then and set it up against a $200 pair of Leupolds, and the Leupolds crush them. So the other thing I like about the Leupold, not to go on a sales pitch for Leupold, that's not what this podcast is about, but the eye cups are replaceable. And so if you damage them or anything like that you can actually get it repaired. A lifetime warranty. So if you do smash it or it gets stepped on, maybe they can salvage some parts on it or try to get it fixed or something to get you back in the game again, so it's not a complete loss. So now that I've taken the time to talk about the one that I'm purchasing, which is the BX4, and it's going to be the 8x32. That's going to be my main set of hunting binoculars. However, though, I am really excited about a set of binoculars that they just released, and it is called the BXT HD. So I guess the BX stands for tactical. It is only offered in 10x42. So the reason I'm switching gears and buying 2 sets of binoculars is one will just be used for here, average hunting scenarios. But the one reason I think this is really awesome is because it's been a long time coming that we finally get a reticle inside our binoculars. So this binocular retails for, I believe, right around $600 or under. I'm not sure what all the sale price is going to be. It's new, so we're still waiting to get ours. But it's a 10x42 mil-L, and it's called a BXT HD. It has been a long time coming to have a set of binoculars with a actual working reticle in it. Now, this isn't new. I remember back even in the 90s that we had binoculars from the military that had milling reticles. How nice of a tool is that? If you can turn your binoculars into somewhat of a spotting scope to help spot at the average shot of 2, 3, 4, 500 yards and see an impact and call correction, that is priceless. We spend a lot of time hunting and spend a lot of time varmint hunting, and we usually either spot with a spotting scope if it's out, if we take it. But more often than not, we actually spot with the rifle. And so everybody's jumping on a gun. Somebody's, okay, I'm on it, go ahead, shoot. How nice would it be to just sit there, prop your elbows up on your knees, and use your binoculars, and if you can spot the shot, if it's a miss, give them a correction. One of the things about optics is they can be a great multi-purpose tool if they're designed properly. And the cool part about binoculars is they're a fixed magnification. So you don't have that zoom in, zoom out, reticle getting bigger or smaller. You don't have to worry about first focal plane, second focal plane. But just to put that in there says a lot. that is actually, as a hunter or as someone who loves to spot, and for most of the people out there now that actually know how to spot, so they see an impact and they can call it, oh my gosh, you're a half mil left, the wind got you. Or a mil left, the wind's got you. At 300, 400 yards with the binoculars, or even out, I would say out to 700 yards with a 10-power binocular, as long as you can hold it steady, set it up on your knees, whatever you have to do in a crook of a tree, you could spot. Now, you're not going to see the bullet strike the animal exactly, but if it throws a puff up in the air, I don't see any reason why you couldn't spot it. And at least have something of a reference that's a real number. A lot of times, the second shots are misses, not because they couldn't shoot the animal or they couldn't hit the steel. It's because they got a bad call. I love it when you go to a match or an event and somebody's looking through a set of binoculars with no reticle and they're calling out corrections. You are 3/10 left. I've seen this, and I don't say anything. Now, keep in mind, I'm there to enjoy myself. I'm not there to preach or teach or any of that. So I sort of keep all of this to myself. But literally, I'm watching a guy call impacts for people and giving corrections to the shooters in a match that has a set of binoculars with no reticle. So at that point, you might as well just use the old, hey, you're a tad left. You can't judge that. I don't have a reticle tattooed into my eye, and so you're guessing. And your bad guess is causing that shooter the second miss. And the same thing happens with binoculars. Like a lot of guides, for example, they have good spotting scopes. They have good binoculars, but they don't have them with reticles. And so if you miss that animal at distance, you're losing that opportunity for good feedback. Because sometimes if you miss right let me rephrase it, sometimes if you miss in the right area, you don't startle the animal. You shoot right over its back, or you shoot, 2 mils left. He might hear that bullet strike the ground, but you're far enough away that he didn't hear the shot, or you're suppressed. You've got the opportunity now to make the second shot. The animal hasn't ran yet. But because nobody has a piece of glass with a reticle in it, you're not going to get good information unless you can self-spot, unless you've seen the impact yourself. Are they going to get you closer? Maybe. Are they going to get you too far? Probably. So you went from missing off the leading edge of the animal now to shooting them in the butt or a gut shot. So why guides and people who are spotting at distance for professional hunters don't have professional equipment with reticles that they can actually learn to use and give the shooter something to adjust with? Well, spotting scopes have had them for a while. You have to spend the money. They're expensive. $1,600 for a Mark IV now with a reticle, first focal plane. That's actually not all that bad. They used to be way more than that. And now you can actually zoom out to 12 magnification up to 40, I believe. So having a binocular now that actually has a reticle in it is just an added tool to your toolbox. So I don't have to jump on my rifle right away. If the animal walks out and it's not my turn to shoot, if whoever I'm hunting with, this is his animal, I can plop on my butt. I'm not making all the commotion of breaking out a spotting scope. I'm not making all the commotion of trying to get on my rifle, all the movements of me trying to get my rifle pointed at that animal along with the person that's sitting beside you. I can just simply sit there, pull up my binoculars, and have a chance at milling the shot with the shooter. That is great. If you're going to buy a set of binoculars, why not get one that just gives you a little bit more of an edge in some scenarios? So, for example, with the reticle. So I'm actually buying two, and I'm not going to carry the 10x42s all the time. I'll be clear with that. The 8x32s are going to be my varmint hunting binoculars. They're going to be my everyday carry for whatever hunt. But if we're going on a really big open plain type thing where we're going to see and we're going to work at much greater distances, I am probably going to take the 10x42 simply because they don't offer it in an 8x42. But the reason I'm making that particular purchase and the reason I'm buying two is because I want the opportunity to have a reticle in my binoculars. So we'll have both of those here at the new armory that's coming up that you can come and check them out. They are on order. They just released them, so I'm not sure when we're going to get ours. It's now February. That gives us a couple months to get them here. But I am a huge fan of this. I think what they're doing is spot on. And I think having a milling reticle in your binoculars is just one more tool. I mean, let's face it, you're already carrying the binoculars. It's not like it's adding any weight, it's etched glass. And so just adding that one tool to your toolbox just gives you one more opportunity in some scenarios to make quick corrections, to call correction for your teammate, to call correction for your hunting partner when the wind gets him off guard. Boy, that's nice. No guessing. We're not trying to mill with our rifles, so we don't have all the commotion of that going on. We're just going to sit down, pull up our binoculars, and we can actually spot a shot for them, which I think is awesome. Real quick, I'd like to thank MDT Chassis. MDT is also a proud sponsor of the show. They make great chassis from the ACC the whole way down to the ORIC. So we like to thank MDT for sponsoring the show, but you can stop over to mdttac.com. That's mdttac.com and check out their full line of chassis today. So I thought the binoculars were sort of an unsung hero that really doesn't get talked about a lot, and some of the thought that goes into it, especially when it comes to weight and the magnification and some of the drawbacks, because it always seems like guys go to the highest magnification possible, and that sometimes comes at a price. So thank you so much for taking the time to join us here at the show. We really appreciate it. If you like the podcast, please leave us a nice comment. Please feel free to share it. We really appreciate it. It does help us a lot in the ratings and the standings, so it helps other people find us a little bit easier. So thank you so much for doing that for us as well. Again, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to email us. My email is contact@wolfprecision.net. And as always, thank you for taking the time to join the show. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. My name is Jamie Dotson. I'm your host, and you are listening to the Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building Podcast.